Everyone says freedom is something you earn. We know the truth. Sometimes it's something you have to fight to remember you were born with. Today's story is about Ryker Flint and Sora, where guilt becomes grace and captivity becomes courage. Out in the hard light of the Arizona desert, everything began with a single step through a general store door. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Ever stand in a doorway and watch a man strike a woman through a film of dust on the glass and feel it in your gut that turning away makes you just as guilty? I was inside Burke Holloway's general store that afternoon, trailing a $200 bounty that should have been easy money. Then I heard it. The sharp snap of leather meeting skin. Casual, thoughtless, like swatting a strayed dog off the porch. Through the window I saw her. Dark eyes, chin lifted against the blow. She didn't flinch the second time his hand smashed across her face. My hand dropped to my Colt before my mind caught up. 5 years riding bounties had trained me to stay out of trouble that wasn't mine. But the way she squared her shoulders, the way her eyes locked onto mine through that dirty pane of glass, it dragged me backward. Back to Mira. Back to the night I chose the badge over my own blood and rode home to smoke and silence. I had failed once, maybe I was fixing to fail again. Or maybe the Almighty was giving a busted man one last crack at doing something right. So I stepped forward. That choice twisted both our lives onto a different trail. You want to call that heroic? Don't be too quick. Heroes don't usually carry this much regret in their saddlebags. I was 42, and there weren't many things left I trusted. A quick draw, a faster horse, and the truth that some debts don't wash clean, no matter how long you ride. They called me Ryker Flint across the territories. The name had weight. It opened doors or cleared rooms, depending on the crowd. Once it hung beneath a star pinned to my chest. It meant law. Order. The belief that if you were fast enough and righteous enough, you could keep the darkness at bay. Mira and little Willa taught me otherwise. Righteous men still bleed. Houses still burn. For 5 years I'd hunted outlaws like animals. Before that, I'd sworn to shield folks from men just like them. The space between those two lives felt like a canyon I couldn't climb out of. I told myself bounty work was clean, honest. Truth was, most of the lies I fed myself dried up before sunrise. That day in Dust Creek, I was trailing Tavio Cruz, a second-rate brawler with a first-rate price on his head. Supposed to be simple. Ride in, cuff him, ride out $200 heavier. Simple died the second Burke Holloway's hand struck that girl. She couldn't have been more than 20. Apache blood in her, mixed with something fierce. It showed in her eyes, dark, burning steady, like the sun flashing off a rifle barrel. Her name was Sora. I learned that later. She moved quiet, almost weightless, slipping around the room like she'd learned long ago how to stay out of reach. 3 years under Holloway's roof had carved that into her bones. Clumsy half-breed, Holloway snarled, spitting tobacco onto the floor while she gathered shards from a smashed whiskey bottle. That's $2. $2 you'll work off at 50 cents a week. The turquoise beads at her throat caught the light, probably the last thing her grandmother Imani ever gave her. Her hands didn't tremble while she cleaned, but her shoulders were drawn tight as a winter bowstring. That's when she looked up. And I saw it, the same look Mira once gave me when I found her crying after her stepfather's visits, back before I carried a reputation, back when I believed wanting to save someone was enough to do it. I pushed through that door before I could talk myself out of it. My spurs struck the plank floor sharp and clear, like a church bell tolling. Only nobody else in that store seemed to hear it. Got a problem here, mister? Burke Holloway's hand fell away from Sora, but the curl of his mouth never shifted. He stood there, 6 feet of prairie swagger stuffed into a 5'8" body. No problem at all, stranger, he said lightly. Just teaching my worker how things run around here. Worker. That's what he called her. Like she was livestock bought at auction. Maybe worse. Livestock costs cash. She owes me, Holloway went on, puffing up like a banty rooster staring down a hawk. $120. Medicine for her grandmother, Imani. 3 years back, he grinned. With interest and penalties, she's pushing $300 now. $300. A number that didn't sit still. It grew, crept, spread like brush fire in August. A prison built out of ink and arithmetic. That night I sat in the Dusty Rose Saloon, whiskey burning a trail down my throat, watching decent folk pretend blindness was contagious. Boots scraped, cards slapped, laughter rose too loud, anything to drown out what they all knew. Della Harrow finally crossed the room and took the empty chair opposite mine. Widow, boarding house keeper, spine made of wire. "You're thinking about that girl," she said, folding her hands on the table. "I can see it plain." I didn't answer. "My husband used to get that same look," she continued, "right before he did something brave and foolish." She studied me over the rim of her glass. "Every man's got a line he won't cross, even if it's drawn in dust." "Holloway owns near half this town," she went on quietly. "Marshal Lorne Cade eats at his table. That girl's been chained there 3 years. We all know it." Her gaze drifted toward the swinging doors. "And we've all let it happen." "Why?" I asked. "Because she's Apache. Because she's alone. Because in towns like this, if your skin's the wrong shade or your pockets ain't heavy enough, you fade into the background." She fixed me with a steady look. "But you see her." Yeah, that was the problem. Later, stretched out on the narrow bed in Della's boarding house, I couldn't close my eyes without seeing Sora's stare. The way her shoulders locked tight, even while Holloway struck her. There was heat under that calm. Banked coals waiting on wind. I had failed Mira. I had failed little Willa. Maybe this was the kind of dawn that brings something ugly into the light. The next morning I followed a tip from a drunk cowhand who smelled like sour mash and regret. He'd seen Tavio Cruz riding the hills behind Holloway's spread. I tracked him easy enough. Found my bounty tied up in scrub and bad decisions. But that wasn't the only thing I uncovered. Behind Holloway's property line, the land told a different story. Fresh cattle brands that didn't match local registries. Hoofprints headed north by night. Holloway wasn't just a cruel merchant. He was the root system feeding the rot. He was running stolen stock through his back acreage, sheltering rustlers and hired blades in exchange for a cut of the take. The store was just the storefront. I trust Tavio Cruz, and left him secured in a wash while I poked around farther. An abandoned line shack held ledgers tucked beneath loose floorboards. Names, dates, tallies. Enough to make U.S. Marshal Cullen Virick lean forward in his saddle, if those papers ever reached him. While I sifted through evidence, Sora sat in the cramped room above Holloway's store, pressing a damp cloth to fresh bruises. She told me later she'd watched me from her window that morning, saw the way I walked. Purpose in every step. "Watch for the signs," her grandmother Imani used to say. "Sometimes courage rides in wearing a stranger's boots." Truth was, I didn't feel brave. I felt furious. At Holloway. At the town. At myself. For every time I'd ridden past misery and told myself it wasn't my affair. By noon, the heat pressed down like judgment, and I walked back into Dust Creek ready to make it everyone's business. I rode back into Burke Holloway's store with Tavio Cruz hog-tied and slung belly down across my saddle. $200 worth of Wanted Man delivered before supper. Folks stepped aside when I pushed through the doors, but I wasn't there for the bounty. I hear you're holding a girl on a debt, I said evenly, letting the words settle heavy in the room. Sora stood near the shelves, hands unsteady as she stacked dry goods. Holloway's eyes flicked toward her, then back to me. "What's that to you?" he asked. "I'm buying her contract. Name it." "She ain't for sale." I gave him a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Everything's got a price, Holloway. Question is, do you want it paid in cash or in lead?" A crowd began to gather outside. In a town like Dust Creek, blood in the air draws people faster than a dinner bell. A gunfight over a woman's debt? That's better than any traveling show. 300, Holloway snapped. Plus compensation for disturbing my business. Funny thing, I said, sliding folded papers from inside my vest. I shared a bottle with Marshal Lorne Cade last night. He reminded me debt servitude's been illegal in this territory since '68. I tapped the page. Seems your little agreement ain't worth the ink. Holloway's face darkened from red to something meaner. You don't know who you're crossing. That so? I let my name fall into the room. Ryker Flint. You could feel the shift, boots scraping backward near the windows. A reputation carries weight, even if it's built on graves and sleepless nights. Holloway's hand twitched toward his pistol. Bad choice. My Colt was against his forehead before leather cleared his holster. I wouldn't, I said softly. I've already sent word to U.S. Marshal Cullen Vierick about those stolen cattle running through your back pasture. You reach for that iron, and I'll spare him the trouble of hauling you to court. But that wasn't the moment that mattered most. The moment came when Sora moved. She rose from behind the counter like smoke lifting off a campfire and stepped between us. In her hand was a narrow Apache blade, thin and bright as winter light. I don't need anyone to purchase my freedom, she said, voice steady, soft as wind, hard as stone. I was never his property. The blade drifted in a slow arc. Holloway's gaze tracked it the way prey watches a circling hawk. This ends today, I said. She walks out free, and you pay her 3 years' wages, or I step aside and let her finish what she started. You think I was bluffing? Holloway didn't. 2 hours later, we were riding west, Dust Creek shrinking behind us in a cloud of kicked-up grit. I'd bought Sora a steady bay mare from the livery, along with provisions, fresh clothes, and the $180 Holloway coughed up once Marshal Lorne Cade, suddenly a champion of the law, arrived waving federal notices about cattle theft. We rode without speaking. I kept quiet because words felt clumsy. She stayed quiet because she was waiting. Waiting for the price. Men always ask for something in return. But as the desert floor lifted into pine-shadowed hills, the silence shifted. It stopped feeling like a barricade and started feeling like space. You didn't have to do that, she said at last. Yes, I answered. I did. Something in my tone made her study me, truly study me, for the first time. I saw her eyes take in the gray threaded at my temples, the line carved by sun and regret. She studied the lines etched into my face, the map the sun and sorrow had carved there over the years. Why? She asked quietly. I stayed silent long enough that she might have thought I wouldn't answer. When I finally did, my voice scraped out rough as gravel. 5 years ago, I had a wife, a little girl. Mira was proud, strong, same way you are. I swallowed hard. The night I lost them, I was riding after a bounty. I stared into the horizon. Figured duty mattered more than home. By the time I rode back, there wasn't anything left to finish. Out here, the desert swallows stories whole, leaves behind only sand and nameless graves. Sora didn't look away. I'm sorry, she said softly. There was weight behind that word. She knew what it cost to carry it. I spent 5 years telling myself some things stay broken, I went on, that some people can't be saved. I looked at her then. Today I stopped believing that. We camped near a stand of cottonwoods beside a stream fed by melting snow high in the mountains. The water ran clear and cold over smooth stone. I built the fire while Sora knelt by the bank, washing the dust of Burke Holloway's store from her skin. I tried not to look, tried hard. But the last light of day slid across her shoulders, turning her into something carved from the land itself. Not delicate, not fragile, strong, like rock shaped by wind and years of storm. Her dark hair hung damp down her back, catching what was left of the sun. When she turned and found me watching, neither of us pretended otherwise. "What happens when we reach San Carlos?" she asked. I nudged the fire with a stick, sparks rising toward the first stars. "That's your call," I said. "I'll see you safe to your people if that's what you choose." "And if I don't? The territory's wide. Plenty of room for a fresh start, if someone wants one bad enough." "And you?" she asked, eyes on the flames. "You planning on starting over too, Ryker Flint?" "Maybe." I met her gaze across the fire. The space between us felt charged, like thunder rolling somewhere beyond the hills. "Depends if I've got something worth starting for." The flames burned low. Night settled around us, warm and close. Sora shifted from her blanket and crossed the small stretch of ground between us. She didn't move out of gratitude. She moved because she recognized something in me. Two restless spirits, tired of carrying ghosts alone. Her lips met mine, soft at first, tasting of cold water and desert dust. And maybe something else. Maybe relief. When she leaned into me, I felt her heartbeat racing beneath the thin cloth of her dress. Her fingers traced the scars on my face like she was learning the shape of every regret. "I used to imagine this," she whispered later against my shoulder, breath warm against my skin. "Being held by someone who sees me as more than something broken." I tightened my arms around her. "You're not broken, Sora," I said. "You're the first right thing I've found in 5 years." We lay beneath a sky thick with stars. And for the first time since Mira and Willa were taken from me, I allowed myself to believe redemption might not be a fool's dream. San Carlos spread across the valley like a scar that never quite closed. Government houses lined in stiff rows. A trading post. And beneath it all, the quiet strain of a people forced to live inside someone else's boundaries. Kiona met us at the edge of the reservation. His dark eyes measured me the way a wolf sizes up another wolf stepping too close to its ground. "Sora," he said in Apache, his tone edged with disbelief. "We thought you were gone." He didn't look at me when he spoke. "Some days I figured the same," Sora answered, sliding down from her mare with that easy, flowing grace that belonged to no one but her. "But I'm still here. We endure." Kiona's eyes shifted to me, hard and measuring. "And this white man?" he asked flatly. "Did he trade coin for you like livestock from Burke Holloway's yard?" "He gave me my freedom," Sora said, calm as still water. "He asked for nothing in return." Kiona let out a sharp, humorless breath. "White men always ask for something." His gaze cut toward me. "The only question is whether you're foolish enough to believe him when he says he won't." That night, inside the council house where the elders gathered to welcome Sora home, I stood in the center like a man awaiting sentence. Chaska, oldest among them, leaned forward. His face bore the deep lines of 40 years of war and broken treaties. "You have killed Apache," he said plainly. "I wore a badge," I answered. "I hunted men who broke the law. I never judged by blood." I held his gaze. I never harmed women or children. I never burned homes. I never raised war against those who only wanted peace. Silence pressed in. And now? Chaska asked. What do you want with our daughter? The weight of that question filled the room. I felt Sora beside me, her breathing tight, steadying herself. Kiona stood with the younger warriors, hand resting on the handle of his knife. I want her to choose her own path, I said at last. Whether that path leads away from me or not. Chaska studied me a long moment before nodding once. You may remain 3 days, he said. On the 4th, you leave. If Sora rides with you, that is her right. If she stays, you will honor it. 3 days. Not enough to build a life, but enough to learn whether one could ever exist. The first day carried stiff silence and watchful glances. Conversations died when I passed. The second day loosened slightly. Some of the younger men had heard my name before. Reputation, even when scarred, can pry open doors. But it was the third day that mattered. I found Sora by the stream that cut through the reservation. She sat on a smooth, flat stone, boots off, feet resting in cold water. Turquoise beads were braided into her hair, a quiet sign of belonging. You've decided, I said, easing down beside her. I've decided I need time, she replied. She turned toward me, and the love in her eyes made the distance already forming between us ache. 3 years of hell don't disappear in 3 days, she said softly, no matter how good those days feel. I need to remember who I was before Burke Holloway tried to crush me. I need to learn who I am now. I nodded, though something heavy settled behind my ribs. And you can't do that with me here, I said. I could, she admitted, but it wouldn't be right. When her fingers slid into mine, lacing together. It felt like both a vow and a farewell. I won't be someone's redemption story, she continued. I won't be the broken thing you fixed, so you can ease the ghosts of Mira and Willa. The words struck clean and hard. Is that what you think this is? I asked quietly. I think you're a good man carrying 5 years of guilt, she answered. And I think I'm a woman who doesn't yet trust her own heart. She squeezed my hand. Give me 1 year. Let me stand steady on my own feet. If what we share is real, it'll still be there. And if it isn't, then we'll have spared each other a beautiful mistake. I rode out of San Carlos the next morning under a sky washed pale with desert light. Sage scented the air. The world felt wide. Behind me, Sora stood on a rise overlooking the reservation, one hand shading her eyes as she watched me ride into the open land. I didn't look back twice. Some choices have to be honored in motion. Even after the miles stretched wide between us, I could feel Sora's eyes on my back. Distance didn't dull it. Some connections ride deeper than sight. I could have stayed. Thrown up a cabin on the edge of the reservation, waited there like a loyal hound hoping for scraps of affection. But that wouldn't have been love. That would have been another cage. Softer bars, maybe, but a cage all the same. I hadn't torn her loose from Burke Holloway just to build a quieter prison of my own. So I turned my horse south toward Tucson. Word had drifted my way about a modest spread for sale. Nothing grand. A few 100 acres. A weather-beaten house begging for repair. Enough open sky to put room between me and the ghosts of Mira and Willa. I bought it, spent my days mending fences, breaking colts, shaping something honest out of hard ground. I started breeding horses, strong, sure-footed stock the army took an interest in, work that asked for sweat instead of blood. 6 months later, I wrote her. No grand speeches, no promises carved in stone. Just the truth. Told her I'd settled on the ranch, that the house faced the mountains at sunrise, that there was room for a garden near the creek bed, Good soil where medicinal plants could take root if someone knew what to grow. If you ever feel like riding this way, I wrote, you'll find the gate open. No demands, no chains disguised as vows, just an invitation. And a man who'd finally learned the difference between saving someone and standing beside them. That spring, the desert bloomed early. One afternoon, I saw a rider crest the ridge east of my pasture. Sun caught the beads braided into her hair before I saw her face. Sora. She rode steady, shoulders squared, smile bright enough to ease 5 years of buried grief. The West always leaves space for another beginning, but it never gives it freely. You bleed for it. You want to know if we lasted? If love stitched up every tear and sanded down every rough edge? That's a tale for another evening, maybe over a bottle and a low fire, when the wind hums through mesquite and carries old memories with it. For now, understand this. Redemption doesn't always roar in with trumpets. Sometimes it looks like stepping back, like giving someone room to find their strength, and being there when they choose to ride back to you. Sometimes, that's enough. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West, stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso Legal /disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice, imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process, but every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.